Today, Bitcoin slumps after new economic data shows signs that inflation might be sticking around and the US job market could be weakening. And we hear from the director of the documentary that claims to have tracked down Bitcoin's creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. By noon Eastern, Bitcoin dropped to the $60,000 level, Ether slumped to just above $2,400, and Solana dropped to $138. All right, let's jump right to our main story. On Tuesday, HBO released Money Electric, the Bitcoin Mystery. In the hour and 40-minute documentary, filmmaker Cullen Hoback travels around the world to track down the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto, the anonymous creator of Bitcoin. At the end of his hunt, Hoback confronts two titans in the Bitcoin community he thinks could be Satoshi. And in the end, he comes away believing that Peter Todd, a Canadian developer who'd been active in the Bitcoin space since the early 2010s, very well could be the long-silent author of the Bitcoin white paper. Now, since the documentary was released, many have come out saying that Peter Todd is not Satoshi, while Hoback insists on what he found. I spoke with Cullen Hoback about this film and what he hoped to accomplish by tracking Satoshi. Cullen Hoback, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, happy to talk to you.
Let me just start by sort of setting the scene for people who haven't seen the film. You spent multiple years immersed in the Bitcoin community, sort of watching the evolution of the cryptocurrency and the network as it gained adoption through Central America and through the collapse in 2022. And I think along the way, we sort of see this shift toward looking for the creator of the Bitcoin white paper, Satoshi Nakamoto. He sort of laid out the idea for Bitcoin in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. Can you talk to me about one, how you started this journey that you were on, and what made you make that turn toward focusing on the identity of Satoshi?
Right. So back when we started the film, I mean, it had been brought up to me, this idea of, okay, can we, you just finished this Q series, maybe you should look for this other anonymous character, Satoshi Nakamoto. And this is a mystery that has hovered over journalists' heads for years. And if I was going to do the story, I needed something that breathed fresh life into it. And that was about more than just the Satoshi mystery. And what launches this investigation is El Salvador's adoption of Bitcoin. And I was very curious who was behind that effort. So I reached out and discovered that, in fact, the company that was kind of driving this effort, the head of that company was also the first person that the creator of Bitcoin had reached out to. That was a suspicious link, and I figured, all right, well, maybe there's something more here. If I can get an interview with the individual who Satoshi had reached out to, a cryptographer named Adam Back, that could breathe some new life into the story. And there'd be more to talk about than just this mystery. It could potentially be a film about the future of money and this emerging battle between the state and the Bitcoiners.
I'm curious not to jump to the end of the documentary because, as you point out, there's so much that you cover in that hour and 40 minutes. But you confront two people that you feel are most likely to be Satoshi. One of them is Adam Back, whom you mentioned, and the other is Canadian developer Peter Todd. It seems like you're more convinced that it's Peter. He's denied it on the tape, and he also continues to deny that he's Satoshi online after the release of this film. The crypto industry,
what's he gonna do?
The crypto industry seems to believe that he's not Satoshi, but you still feel convinced that he is.
Well, I think we make a very strong case in the film. I think there's a lot more evidence to support this theory. And ultimately, look, he's obviously more than 15 years have gone by. If you are in fact Satoshi, it's not like suddenly you'll just come out and say, you got me, right? But I think it really comes down to how the audience interprets his reaction to being confronted with the evidence. And so that's why I think that there's a number of people who wanted to dismiss the conclusion outright because it didn't necessarily align with what they wanted to believe or other preconceived notions. And I would just say, okay, well, it would probably be worth watching the arc of this story and taking some of this evidence into consideration and arriving at your own conclusions.
It goes to a question that I deal with a lot when covering this space. And there's this idea around trolling in crypto. we encounter it a lot. We see it a lot in your film itself. You talk about how some of the characters were sort of interacting with one another in ways that could be considered teasing, but it could be very well be true. It's hard to tell. And so when you're going through this story, how did you decide what you chose to believe, or how quickly you chose to believe something that someone said? Because oftentimes it does feel like in this industry, it's pretty common to lead people down a fake path.
Well, I think that the sort of trolling and muddying the waters is a big part of the game theory. And it's part of why no one has necessarily, or very few people prior to this, had looked in Peter's direction. And because he's muddied the waters so effectively, being a contrarian and doing some trolling, kind of like you see in the film, it makes it easy to dismiss. But I think that you will see a reaction from him when confronted with the evidence that kind of flies above a lot of that. But also that trolling or that kind of behavior that you're describing, it's one of the reasons I didn't really consider him to be a suspect for almost a year. It wasn't until I reflected on something that another early developer in Bitcoin had told me, that the code didn't look like it was written by a professional developer. And there were some other key clues. If you take Adam Back's story about how Satoshi approached him in the beginning and didn't have knowledge about certain things, like something that other cryptographers had written called like B money. The fact that he named his thing something called eCash, which was also the same name that David Chaum had used for his invention in the early 90s. These things indicate that it would be someone younger. So taking those pieces into consideration and saying, okay, well, Adam's behavior on camera is pretty suspicious. He seems to be covering up something. But if he's not covering up for himself, who might he lie to protect? And that put me on a different path. And that's part of why I started to look at Peter Todd. Of course, I think there's this key piece of evidence that starts to unlock the greater mystery there. But again, it is just a theory. I just think it's a strong theory at this point.
To your point, it's a theory, and it's one that's spurred a lot of conversation online. But I think it also goes to this question that a lot of people are asking about, why do you feel like it matters who Satoshi might be? I think his identity has become a sort of a lore in and of itself. It's got this idea that Bitcoin community has been put forth as this ideal around free money. Satoshi himself has gifted this technology to the world, and it's maybe in some ways helped keep Bitcoin specifically from falling into the same issues that altcoins have faced. My question is, does his identity matter outside of that lore? And at the same time, he may be the largest holder of Bitcoin, but the next largest are BlackRock, MicroStrategy, and Grayscale, these corporations that are only growing their numbers.
I think that this mystery of, Bitcoin's creator was helpful for Bitcoin for some time. At this point, it seems more like a vulnerability to the network. This idea that there could be someone out there who controls a 20th of the total supply. I think folks want to believe that they're not going to reemerge and pull the lever someday. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not only interested in who's behind it, but whether or not they still have access. I think because countries and people's 401ks are now being associated with Bitcoin, that has made the question perhaps more pressing than ever. So I think we've arrived at a moment where understanding the mind of the person behind this is important. And I think that if Satoshi is still alive and they still have access, something that they could do at this point would be to burn the million or so coins. That would be something that would perhaps be good for Satoshi and also for Bitcoin.
So maybe this leads into the final question I have. Outside of the controversy around Satoshi, what do you feel should be the takeaway for people who watch this film? Are you hoping that this film does something specifically for the Bitcoin community, or are you aiming for something larger for the public generally?
When I tell a story like this, my goal is just really to help people understand these forces that are working kind of behind the scenes and shaping our reality and our financial future. Um, so that's really my hope. And and then also, I think people enjoy a good mystery. So those two things in concert, I mean, I I think we made a film that is a pretty good ride on top of also revealing a lot about the future of money.
All right, that's all for Crypto World today. We're back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.